Jungkook sits at the long mahogany table with a chair carved with carvings of rose veins behind him. The large office windows are open, revealing the city skyline. Jungkook is wearing a dark purple button shirt which has already been undone by several buttons. His gaze is cold and distant. The phone on the table rang out an audible tone in the office, attracting his attention. The sound of ringing pierced the silence of the office. His gaze was fixed on the office window behind him, but he reached out and picked up the ringing phone. Jungkook found him, he asked. The man on the other end of the line spoke. Yes, boss, we caught him. His gaze shifted to the window in front of him, a hint of a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He leaned back in his chair, a smirk faintly, his gaze fixed on the skyline. He cut off the call without speaking another word. Pushing back his chair to stand up, he smoothed out the fabric of his trouser and go out of. On the other hand, Vine was sitting on the bonnet of her car, her legs dangling over the edge. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun, revealing the tanned skin on her neck. Her eyes were fixed on the street, her expression indifferent and bored. She turned her head to her man, her bored expression giving way to a subtle frown. Vine, don't tell me that they're not coming, she inquired, her voice laced with irritation. The man's face turned serious. It's confirmed, ma'am. Tikona used this road, he replied. Vine, it's been a while since I messed with him, she murmured, a smirk playing on her face. She leaned against the hood of the car, her arms crossed in front of her chest. Three black cars appeared in the distance. The sound of their engines was a low rumble that seemed to fill the night air. Her eyes remained fixed on the cards, her gaze unwavering. Vine, give me my gun, she instructed her man. The man nodded and reached into the glove box, pulling out a gun and handing it to her. She held it firmly in her hand. She checked the magazine to make sure it was fully loaded, her fingers running over the smooth gunmetal. She raised the gun up and aimed it at the middle car. Her eyes were fixed on the target, her finger gripped around the trigger. With a steady pull, she fired the gun. The bullet struck the tire of the middle car, crashing it to deflate instantly. The gunshot echoed through the night, the sound cutting through the stillness of the air. The car in the middle spun out of control, losing its balance and careening off the road. The men in the car exited the vehicle, holding up their guns at her. One of them, a dark-haired man, spoke up, his tone serious. Back away, Miss Shadow. Stay out of this. She chuckled darkly, her expression smug. While, oh, I know it's not my matter, but it has been a while since I had the pleasure of irritating him, she replied, a touch of malice in her voice. The men with guns looked at each other, their expression uncertain. They were wary of her, aware of her reputation, but they were also aware that they had the advantage here. The man who spoke earlier spoke up again. Miss Shadow, I advise you to withdraw. This is unnecessary trouble. Her face a look of mock regret, but her eyes betrayed her true feelings. Wine. Unnecessary trouble, you say, she replied with a hint of sarcasm. Oh, but the trouble is just what I thrive on. The men exchanged glances, their expression getting more serious. One of them spoke up again. They can't do anything. They don't have permission. Miss Shadow, I repeat, this is unnecessary and dangerous. Your involvement will only make things more complicated. She turned her gaze towards the car that she had shot, seeing the enemy rival running frantically. When my work is done, she said to her man, her expression satisfied. Let's go. The man looked at Vine as she walked away, watching her retreating figure with a mixture of irritation and caution. One of the men turned to his companion. Check on the rival, he ordered, pointing towards the crashed car. He's gone, he ran away, one of them said in panic. The other man's eye followed the direction in which he had disappeared. She came just to make him run. He said, his expression with tight with worry. The boss will not leave us. Jungkook felt his jaw tighten as he sat in the car, his hand gripping the wheel tightly. She again, that woman always knew how to make him work twice. Today he was not going to let her off easy. Making his enemy running away was a blow to his pride and ego. He had been looking forward to make him suffer, but Ryan had ruined his plans. His car roared through the dark streets, the engine pouring like a hungry tiger. He had caught sight of her car in the distance, and a determined light flared in his gaze. He floored the gas pedal, the car's accelerator digging into the pavement as he drew closer. Her car jolted as it collided with his, the collision causing its deafening thud. Her car stopped abruptly, brought to a halt by the force. Her eyes widened in surprise as the two cars hit each other. She hit the brake, her car coming to a sudden halt. She looked out her window, her gaze meeting Jungkook's intense one. His jaw was clenched, his eyes fixed on hers. He stared at her through the windshield, his expression a mix of annoyance and determination. The engine of his car was still running. The headlights. She stepped out of his car, his expression still tense and focused. His eyes never left Ryan's face as he walked around the hood of his car to confront her. She watched as he approached. She stepped out of the car, mirroring his movement. He stood in front of Ryan, his expression cold and stern. He held his gun out towards her, his gaze never wavering. His face betrayed no emotion. The weapon was deadly and steady as he was. A smirk played on her lips as she met his gaze. Her eyes betrayed no emotion, her expression as calm as unbothered as ever. She stood before him, her chin lifted. His eyes narrowed as he saw her expression. He knew that smirk well. It was the same smirk she always wore when she wanted to provoke him. His voice was low and dangerous as he spoke, his eyes never leaving hers. Jungkook, if you ever even thought about interfering in my business again, I will make sure every single bullet goes through in your skull. Her lips curled up in a smirk that never wavered, as if mocking the threat. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes meeting his. When you can, she said, her voice cool and unwavering. You have tried many times. He tightened his grip on the gun, irritation creeping into his expression. He hated the way she could so easily get under his skin, and yet she always found a way to push his buttons. He moved the gun towards her chin, lifting her head. He leaned closer, his voice a low growl. Jungkook, don't provoke me, he said, his grip firm as he pressed the cold metal against her skin. Her eyes met his, a flicker of defiance in her gaze. She didn't flinch, unbothered by the weapon against her chin. Fine, just say you can't win against me, she repeated his words back, her voice taunting. She didn't move the gun against her chin, not facing her. Jungkook, even if I win, I would still lose, he said, her smirk widened as she saw the conflict in his expression. She knew he was torn between wanting to take her down and his deep feeling for her. Wine. You and I both know that, darling. He put the gun aside, his hand moving to grip her neck. He pulled her closer, their faces inches apart, his eyes locked onto hers, intense and unwavering. Jungkook, admit it, Miss Shadow. He said, his voice firm. You always mess up my business because you want my attention, don't you? Say it louder. She met his gaze, her eyes sparkling with a hint of mischief. Man, if I admit it, she said, her voice soft yet firm. Jungkook, then this mafia, who the world knows to fear. He said, his voice low and intense. The mafia who never bows down to anyone will kneel down before you. I will tell the world that this mafia queen is officially my queen, and that if anyone dares to mess with you, they should have come to me first. Her lips curled in a smile as she spoke, her voice full of playful banter. When are you proposing me, darling? She asked, her tone laced with armor. Jungkook, I might be, he replied, a mischievous glint in his eyes. When? Then, and if you ever dare to look at someone else, I will kill you myself, she replied, her tone playful yet firm. He chuckled softly at her words, a mixture of amusement and affection on his face. Jungkook, is that the threat or promise, darling? She shrugged, a coy smirk playing on her lips. Mine, it's the warning, darling, I don't share. His expression turned darker, his gaze intense as he looked at her. Jungkook, good, he replied, his voice gruff, because I don't either. Jungkook, now you are mine, right? It was not a question, nor he was saying. He was fixed on her. She chuckled and met Jungkook's intense gaze. Fine. It's quite a unique proposal, she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. But I suppose it works. Yeah, now I am yours, Jungkook. I am Mafia, darling, he said, his voice gruff. I don't do things the usual way. She tiptoed, her short stature allowing her to easily meet his gaze. Her smile widened as she looked up at him. She leaned in, smashing her lips against his in a heated kiss. The kiss filled with a mix of passion and possessiveness. He responded immediately, his arm wrapping around her slim waist, pulling her closer. He deepened the kiss, his tongue slipping into her mouth, claiming her in a possessive gesture.